He said, "Maybe if you earned more, I'd respect you the way my cousin respects her fiancé." And I remember the exact second my body reacted before my mind did. My chest tightened first, like the air had been pulled out of it, and then the meaning caught up. My hand stayed steady on the steering wheel, my eyes fixed on the road ahead, and I answered with a calm I didn't feel. Noted. That one word sounded small, almost casual, but something irreversible happened in that moment. Because until that night, I truly believed we were in a relationship built on mutual respect and partnership. I'm 36 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I was loved for who I was, not for what I could eventually provide. My boyfriend and I had been together for 2.5 years. We met at a friend's wedding, connected over our shared love of hiking and terrible action movies, and everything unfolded naturally after that. No dramatic sparks, no red flags, just a quiet sense of, this feels right. But about 6 months ago, his cousin got engaged, and that was when the comparisons began. Every family gathering turned into a silent competition I never agreed to enter. Their conversations shifted, their questions sharpened. His relatives talked endlessly about his cousin's fiancé, an investment banker who made money in his sleep, about the ring that cost more than my car, about destination weddings and vacation properties. And my boyfriend started squeezing my hand just a little too tightly whenever those topics came up. At first it was subtle, casual questions disguised as concern. Have you thought about moving into management? Do you think you'll ever aim higher? Are you really happy where you are? I told him the truth. I liked my job. I liked my team. I made good money. Not flashy money, but stable, comfortable money. And I wasn't interested in sacrificing my peace for titles and politics. He nodded, but I saw it in his eyes. Disappointment. Not loud, not cruel, just quiet and persistent. Then came the drive home from his cousin's engagement party, champagne towers, string quartets, that ring flashing under crystal lights, and the tension between us was so thick I could feel it radiating from his side of the car. When he finally said it out loud, it didn't feel like an argument. It felt like a verdict. And that was the moment I realized something terrifying. He didn't respect me. Not the way that mattered to him. I didn't always feel small next to him. That's the part people never understand when they hear how things ended. In the beginning, I felt chosen. I felt steady. I felt like I was standing beside someone, not behind them. I'm 36. I work in data analytics for a mid-sized tech firm. It's not glamorous, no fancy titles, no business cards that impress strangers at dinner parties, but it's stable work I'm good at, work that pays me a comfortable six-figure salary and gives me my evenings back. I like structure, I like clarity, I like knowing where I stand. He was different. A marketing manager at a pharmaceutical company, charismatic, well-spoken, ambitious in a way that felt exciting at first. He liked talking about growth, momentum, visibility. He liked being seen as someone going places. And in the early days, that energy pulled me in. We met at a friend's wedding, standing near the bar, both pretending to be deeply interested in a conversation about centerpieces just to avoid small talk with strangers. He made a joke about the DJ playing the worst possible remix of an action movie soundtrack. I laughed too hard. He noticed. We talked about hiking trails, guilty pleasure movies, and how neither of us trusted people who didn't like breakfast food. It felt easy, natural, unforced. For the first year, everything aligned. We split time between my apartment and his. Weekend hikes, movie nights, quiet mornings with coffee and shared silence. He told me he admired how grounded I was. I told him I liked his drive. It felt balanced. I met his family slowly. Dinners at his parents' house, holidays with his extended relatives. At first they were polite, curious, welcoming enough. His mother asked about my job, nodded approvingly when I explained it. His aunt commented that it was nice to meet a woman who was practical. I didn't notice the tone then, or maybe I didn't want to. The first shift happened when his cousin got engaged. She was 28, worked in fashion PR, and seemed to exist in a world of curated perfection. Her fiancé was introduced like a resume. Investment banker, high earner, strategic thinker, a man who apparently made money while sleeping. From that moment on, every family gathering changed. Questions about my work stopped being neutral. They became pointed. What's your next step? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Is there growth where you are? I answered honestly, I liked my role. I wasn't chasing titles. I valued balance. His mother would smile politely. His aunt would change the subject to the cousin's wedding plans. And my boyfriend would sit beside me, quiet, his jaw tight. After those dinners, he'd always say the same thing. They don't mean anything by it. And I believed him, or I told myself I did. Because love, when you want it to last, has a way of convincing you to minimize things that make you uncomfortable. I told myself it was normal, that families compare, that ambition looks different on different people, that respect didn't have to be loud to be real. I didn't realize yet that he was slowly rewriting the definition of respect in his own mind, and that one day he would say it out loud, without flinching. The shift wasn't sudden. That's what made it dangerous. It crept in quietly, disguised as concern, masked as motivation, wrapped in the language of wanting the best. After family dinners, he started asking more questions, not accusatory, not outright critical, just persistent. Have you ever thought about switching companies? Do you think your role has a ceiling? Would you ever consider something more high impact? At first, I answered patiently. I explained how my team functioned, how I liked the culture, how I valued stability over constant performance theater. I told him I wasn't afraid of hard work. I just didn't believe my worth was tied to being perpetually exhausted. He would nod, but his eyes drifted away when I spoke, like he was already imagining a different version of me. A more impressive version, one that fit better at his family's table. Then the comments started slipping out at odd moments. When I chose a modest hotel for a weekend trip, he joked that his cousin would never stay somewhere without a spa. When I drove my car to a family event, he casually mentioned how his cousin's fiancé had just upgraded to something with better presence. Presence. That word lingered with me. At gatherings, I noticed how his posture changed around his cousin and her fiancé, how he laughed a little louder, how he repeated stories about my job, but softened them, simplified them, like he was translating me into something easier to digest. I started feeling like a resume instead of a person. One night, after another dinner where his aunt had praised his cousin's fiancé for providing security, I asked him directly, "Does my job embarrass you?" He looked genuinely surprised. "No, of course not. Why would you think that?" "Because you go quiet every time they talk about money. Because you stop holding my hand when they start comparing. Because you defend me by saying I'm comfortable instead of capable." But I didn't say that. I just shrugged and let it go, like I always did. The truth is, I didn't want to see it yet. I was invested. 2.5 years doesn't vanish easily. I had integrated him into my routines, my future plans, my sense of home. I'd imagined buying a house together someday, traveling, building something steady. Steady became a problem somewhere along the way. The night of his cousin's engagement party made everything sharper. The venue was all polished stone and glass, champagne towers, stacked like monuments. His cousin spent the night showing off her ring, the diamond catching every light in the room. Her fiancé held court with the men, talking about investments and markets. I stood beside my boyfriend, holding a drink I didn't really want, feeling increasingly invisible. On the drive home, the silence was heavy. I could feel the tension rolling off him in waves. "Are you okay?" I asked. "I'm fine." "You don't seem fine." He stared out the window for a long moment before speaking. "Do you ever really think about your future?" I told him I did, that I saw us, a house, stability, a life built together. He repeated the word like it disappointed him. "Stable." And in that pause, in that single syllable stretched thin with judgment, something settled uncomfortably in my chest. The worst part wasn't the comparison. It was realizing he was starting to agree with it. The night everything finally broke was supposed to be a celebration. His cousin's engagement party was held at an upscale venue that looked like it had been designed to impress people who were already hard to impress. Marble floors, tall glass walls, champagne towers glowing under warm lights, a live string quartet playing softly in the corner, like money itself had learned how to hum. From the moment we walked in, I felt out of place, not because of what I was wearing or who I was, but because of how aware I suddenly became of how I was being measured. His cousin floated through the room like royalty, her ring catching the light every time she lifted her hand. People gathered around her, asking about Italy, about venues, about guest lists. Her fiancé stood nearby, relaxed, confident, surrounded by men discussing market trends and investment strategies as if they were trading stories instead of numbers. I stayed close to my boyfriend, nursing a beer, listening more than speaking. Every time someone asked me what I did, I answered politely. Every time the conversation drifted back to his cousin's fiancé and his success, I noticed my boyfriend growing quieter as the night went on. His jaw stayed tight. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. On the drive home, the silence felt heavier than the noise of the party. The city lights blurred past the windows, and I could feel tension radiating from his side of the car. "You okay?" I asked softly. "I'm fine." "You don't seem fine." He didn't answer right away. He stared out the window for a long moment, his reflection ghosting across the glass. "Do you ever think about your future?" he finally said. "Like really think about it." "I do," I replied, "all the time." "And what do you see?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "I see us, hopefully. I see buying a house together someday, traveling, building something stable." He exhaled sharply. "Stable." The word came out flat, almost sour. "What's wrong with stable?" I asked, my voice tighter than I intended. He turned to look at me then, and the expression on his face stopped my breath. It wasn't angry, it wasn't frustrated. It was cold. "Maybe if you earned more," he said, "I'd respect you the way my cousin respects her fiancé." The words hit me like a physical blow. My chest constricted, my ears rang. For a split second, I thought I might have misheard him. I kept my eyes on the road. My hand stayed steady on the wheel. "Noted," I said. "That's it?" he snapped. "Noted? What do you want me to say?" "I want you to care," he said. "I want you to want more. I want a partnership." "I want a partnership too," I replied, my voice shaking now. "I want someone who values me for who I am, not what I earn." "Those things aren't mutually exclusive." "Apparently they are to you." The rest of the drive passed in silence. When we got home, he went straight to the bedroom and closed the door. I stayed on the couch for hours, staring at nothing, replaying his words over and over. "Maybe if you earned more, I'd respect you." The implication was unmistakable. He didn't respect me now, not in the way that mattered to him. The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened, made coffee, asked about my meetings, kissed me goodbye before work. But something fundamental had shifted. I couldn't unhear it. I couldn't unknow it. And once I allowed myself to sit with that truth, another memory surfaced. A comment his cousin had made months earlier at a family dinner, half joking, half bragging, about how her fiancé had insisted on a prenuptial agreement before proposing. I remembered the way she laughed, and the flicker of something wounded behind her smile. That was when an idea took shape in my mind. Quiet, precise, and impossible to ignore. In the days that followed, I didn't explode. I didn't scream. I didn't pack my bags in a dramatic rush or call my friends to dissect every sentence he'd said. Instead, I went quiet. I went to work. I sat through meetings. I answered emails. I nodded when people spoke to me. On the outside, everything looked the same. On the inside, my mind replayed that one sentence on a loop, like it was trying to wear down my resistance through repetition. "Maybe if you earned more, I'd respect you." I tried briefly to understand him. I told myself he'd been under pressure, that his family's comparisons had gotten into his head. That jealousy can make people say things they don't fully mean. I asked myself whether I'd missed something, whether I'd unknowingly failed some unspoken expectation. But the more I examined it, the clearer it became. That sentence hadn't come from nowhere. It was too specific, too practiced, too cleanly delivered. It was something he'd been thinking for a while. The next morning, he moved through our routine like nothing had happened. He made coffee, asked if I had any big meetings, kissed me on the cheek before leaving for work. The normalcy felt surreal, almost cruel. I sat alone at the kitchen table long after he left, staring at my untouched mug, realizing something uncomfortable. If I hadn't stayed calm in the car that night, if I hadn't answered with that single word, "noted," he would have framed the moment as an argument. He would have blamed emotions, tone, delivery. But because I didn't react the way he expected, the truth had nowhere to hide. Over the next few days, I thought, really thought. I remembered the comment his cousin had made months earlier, framed as a joke at a family dinner. How she'd laughed about her fiancé insisting on a prenup before proposing. How she'd said it was just smart business. How everyone had nodded like that made perfect sense. At the time, I'd barely registered it. Now it came back with startling clarity. I remembered the way her smile hadn't reached her eyes. I called a lawyer friend under the pretense of curiosity. I asked hypothetical questions. What clauses were common? What was enforceable? What someone with significant assets usually demanded before marriage? Then I started researching on my own. Late at night, after my boyfriend had gone to bed, I sat at my laptop, reading through legal templates, adjusting language, formatting paragraphs. I wasn't angry when I did it. That's what surprised me most. I was methodical. It took me about a week to draft the document. I made it look official, clean, precise, professional, the kind of thing that doesn't scream manipulation because it looks so reasonable on the surface. The key clause was buried deep on page 7. Clinical language, neutral tone, nothing emotional, just numbers, percentages, contributions. And then there was the final page, a financial disclosure form, assets, debts, income, expected future earnings. At the bottom, in small but unmistakable text, a statement acknowledging that financial compatibility and respect for economic contribution were fundamental to the partnership. I printed it on heavy paper, slipped it into a leather portfolio, and I waited. The strange thing was, I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel victorious. I felt sad. Sad that I needed to do this at all. Sad that love had turned into something that needed footnotes and clauses. But I also felt something else, something steadier. Clarity. Because I wasn't doing this to punish him. I was doing it to see him clearly, to see whether respect, the thing he claimed mattered so much, actually went both ways. And once that decision settled inside me, I knew there was no going back to how things were before. No matter how the conversation ended, the right moment arrived quietly, the way most life-changing moments do. We were having dinner at his place on a Friday night. Nothing special. Pasta he'd made himself, a shared bottle of wine, soft music in the background. If someone had looked in from the outside, they would have seen a couple winding down at the end of the week. Comfortable, familiar, almost normal. Almost. I watched him talk about his day, his voice animated, his gestures relaxed. He laughed at something I barely registered, and all I could think was how strange it felt to sit across from someone who had already told me, plainly, that my worth in his eyes was conditional. When there was a pause in the conversation, I set my fork down. "I've been thinking about what you said," I began. He looked up immediately, alert, guarded. What I said when? "After your cousin's engagement party, in the car." His shoulders stiffened. "I told you I was frustrated." "I know," I said calmly, "and I appreciate honesty, so I want to be honest too." I reached down beside my chair, picked up the leather portfolio, and slid it across the table toward him. He frowned. "What's this?" "Open it." He hesitated for just a second before untying the string and lifting the cover. I watched his eyes move across the first page. Confusion flickered across his face, then surprise. "Is this a prenup?" "It's similar to what your cousin's fiancé required before proposing," I said. "I figured if we're talking about respect and financial compatibility, we should be clear about expectations." He flipped through the pages slowly. The room felt suddenly smaller, quieter. I paid attention to everything. The way his breathing changed, the way his jaw tightened when he reached page 7. "This," he said, tapping the paper, "I don't understand this part." "In the event of a divorce," I replied evenly, "each party retains only what they contributed financially. Shared assets are divided proportionally. No claim to future earnings or career advancement." He went still. Given our income disparity, the implication was obvious. I would walk away with significantly more than he would. "Are you proposing?" he asked, his voice tight. "I'm proposing a conversation," I said, "about what you actually value." He flipped to the final page, the financial disclosure form. I watched his hand stop moving completely. He read it once, then again. His face drained of color as he took in what was being asked of him. Assets, debts, income, expected future earnings. "You want me to list everything," he said quietly. "That's what your cousin did," I replied. "That's what people do when financial respect is the foundation of a relationship." "But we're not even engaged." "No," I said, "we're not. But you made it clear that financial success is tied to your respect for me. I'm just making sure we're aligned on what that means." He pushed his chair back and stood, running a hand through his hair. "This feels like a test." "It is," I said. "The same test you've been giving me for 6 months." "That's not fair." "You said maybe if I earned more, you'd respect me," I replied. "That's a condition. That's transactional. I'm just responding in kind." He started pacing his kitchen, agitation radiating off him. "This is insane. You're being manipulative." "I'm being honest," I said. "You want someone you can respect based on earning potential. Someone who makes you look good at family gatherings. Someone whose success validates your choices." "That's not true." "Then sign it." He stopped pacing. "What?" "If you really respect me for who I am," I said, "sign it. It's just paperwork. It formalizes what should already be true." He picked the papers up again, his hands shaking now, reading more carefully. I could see the moment it clicked. The realization that this agreement didn't protect him. It exposed him. "I need time to think," he said finally. "Take all the time you need," I replied. "But while you're thinking, ask yourself what you're really thinking about. Whether you trust me, or whether you're realizing you don't want a partnership where you're not the primary beneficiary." He looked at me then, really looked at me, like he was seeing a stranger. "When did you become so cold?" he asked. "When I realized the person I loved saw me as a financial disappointment." That conversation didn't end anything officially, but it cracked something open that couldn't be sealed again. 8 days passed. He called 17 times. I answered twice. The first time, he said I was overreacting. The second, he admitted he'd been unfair but accused me of being vindictive. "I'm not vindictive," I told him. "I'm honest." 2 days later, I got a text from his cousin. She'd seen the document. "That's exactly what I had to sign," she wrote. "How did you know?" I replied with 2 words. "Lucky guess." And in that moment, the situation stopped being just between us. It started spreading. The lowest point didn't arrive in a dramatic explosion. There was no shouting, no slammed doors, no public scene. It arrived quietly. It was a Tuesday night. I was alone in my apartment, sitting on the edge of my bed with my phone in my hand, staring at a screen that hadn't lit up in hours. The silence felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had, heavy in a way that pressed down on my chest and made it hard to breathe. I realized something then that hurt more than anything he'd said. If he never called again, part of me would be relieved. And that thought scared me, because relief meant I had already detached somewhere deep inside. It meant the relationship I'd been trying to protect had already died, and I was just catching up to the loss. His family had started circling by then, subtle at first. A missed call from his mother, a message from his aunt asking if everything was okay. The kind of concern that doesn't ask how you're feeling, only whether you're being difficult. Friends we shared went quiet. Conversations stalled. Invitations stopped coming. I could feel the narrative shifting without me ever being in the room. I was the one who had sprung a prenup. I was the one who had tested him. I was the one who had changed. No one asked why. Late one night, I replayed the drive home from the engagement party again in my head. The way his voice had sounded when he said it, not angry, not emotional. Certain. That certainty was what broke me. Because it meant I hadn't misinterpreted anything. I hadn't exaggerated. I hadn't been too sensitive. He'd meant it. Respect in his world had a price threshold. And I didn't meet it. I cried that night for the first time since everything started. Not loud, dramatic sobs. Quiet ones. The kind where your throat aches from holding everything in and your body shakes without making a sound. I cried for the version of myself who had sat at family tables smiling politely while being compared, for the woman who had explained her job like an apology, for the future I'd imagined, the house, the trips, the life that now felt naive. Mostly I cried because I loved him. And loving someone who doesn't respect you is one of the loneliest experiences there is. The next day he showed up at my apartment. I'd been expecting it. That didn't make it easier. He stood in my doorway looking exhausted, eyes rimmed red, shoulders slumped like he'd been carrying a weight he didn't know how to put down. "I'm not signing it," he said immediately. "Okay," I replied. The simplicity of my answer seemed to confuse him. "That's it." He searched my face. "That's all you have to say." "You made your choice," I said calmly. "I respect it." "You don't respect it," he shot back. "You're trying to force me to admit something." "No," I said. "I'm asking you to be honest." We sat across from each other in my living room, the air thick with everything unsaid. "What does that tell you?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. "That you want the option to benefit from my stability," I said, "while keeping your respect contingent on achievements I haven't reached yet." "That's not fair." "You want a safety net," I continued softly, "not a partner." He started crying then, real crying. His hands shook as he wiped his face, frustration and shame tangled together. "That's not what I want," he said. "I just want you, the way we were." "We can't go back," I replied. "You said something that revealed how you really feel. I can't unhear it." We sat in silence for a long time. Then I asked the question that had been haunting me since the car ride. "Do you respect me, right now? Not the version of me I could become. Not the one who earns more someday. Me." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I want to," he whispered. And in that moment I knew. Because wanting to respect someone is not the same as respecting them. That was the moment everything finally broke. Not loudly, but completely. The shift didn't happen all at once. It didn't come with a speech or a sudden surge of strength. It came quietly, settling into me over the days that followed, like a truth I could no longer outrun. After he left my apartment that night, I didn't cry again. That surprised me. I felt hollow, yes, drained, but beneath that exhaustion was something steadier beginning to form. Clarity. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a message from his cousin. I saw what you sent him, she wrote. That's the exact same agreement I had to sign. Every clause, every word. How did you know? I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. Lucky guess. 3 minutes passed. Then another message came through. When he asked me to sign it, I felt humiliated, she wrote, like my entire worth had been reduced to a balance sheet. Everyone told me I should be grateful, that this was just how successful men protect themselves. I remember crying alone in my bathroom that night, wondering if love was supposed to feel like a negotiation. My chest tightened as I read her words. And now, she continued, your boyfriend made me feel guilty for wanting a partnership before signing, like I was a gold digger for expecting my career and contributions to matter. Was that your point? To make him feel what I felt? I didn't respond. Because the truth was, I hadn't set out to make anyone feel anything specific. I hadn't planned a lesson. I hadn't scripted a moral outcome. I just wanted the truth to surface. And it had. That conversation with his cousin did something unexpected. It stripped away the doubt I'd been carrying. The question of whether I'd gone too far, whether I'd been unfair, whether I'd let my pride get in the way of love. I hadn't imagined the imbalance. It was real. It was systemic. It had been normalized around me for so long that I'd started questioning my own instincts. That night, I looked around my apartment, the space I paid for, the life I built, the stability I'd been made to feel wasn't enough. I thought about all the times I'd softened myself, explained myself, minimized myself so someone else could feel bigger. And for the first time since everything began, I felt something close to peace. The next morning, I woke up with a decision already made. When he showed up again later that week, I saw it in his face before he spoke. He looked smaller somehow, not weaker, just stripped of the certainty he used to carry so effortlessly. I've been thinking, he said as he sat down, about everything. So have I replied. He hesitated. I don't think the document was real. I think you made it to scare me. It wasn't real, I said. I fabricated it based on what your cousin went through. His eyes flickered. So you were never actually going to propose like that? Does it matter? I asked gently. It matters to me. No, I said quietly. It doesn't. Because the document was never the point. Respect was. I wanted you to understand what it feels like, I continued, to have someone reduce your worth to financial calculations, to feel measured, compared, found lacking. He swallowed hard. Did it work? I held his gaze. I don't know. Do you understand now? He didn't answer. And I realized then that understanding wasn't enough. Even remorse wasn't enough, because respect that arrives only after a shock isn't respect. It's damage control. That was the moment I chose myself. Not angrily, not dramatically, but completely. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They unraveled slowly, the way reputations do when the truth finally has room to breathe. After that last conversation, I stopped initiating contact. No checking in, no clarifying texts, no emotional cleanup. I let silence do what explanations never could. At first, he tried to regain control of the narrative. He told mutual friends I had tested him, that I'd blindsided him with legal documents, that I'd turned a relationship into a transaction. The story traveled quickly, polished just enough to make him sound like the reasonable one. But stories have a weakness. They fall apart when too many people know the details. His cousin stopped responding to his calls. I didn't hear this from him. I heard it through the quiet shift in tone at the next family gathering. I didn't attend. His mother's messages grew shorter. His aunt stopped asking whether I was overreacting. Because once the cousin spoke up, the comparison machine turned inward. She told them what it felt like to be asked to sign away her future in exchange for a ring. She told them about the shame, the pressure, the way respect had been framed as something she needed to earn by accepting less. And suddenly my overreaction didn't look so unreasonable. He noticed the change before I did. One evening he called, his voice tight with frustration. They're acting like I'm the villain. I didn't tell them anything, I replied calmly. I know, he said. That's the worst part. Because the truth had started doing its own work. At work, his focus slipped. He missed deadlines, snapped at colleagues. The confidence he once carried so effortlessly seemed to drain away under the weight of self-awareness he didn't know how to manage. People started asking questions he couldn't answer without confronting himself. Why did respect matter so much when it came to money? Why did stability suddenly feel embarrassing? Why did he need to feel superior to feel secure? Those questions followed him everywhere. When he showed up at my apartment again, weeks later, he looked like someone who'd lost more than a relationship. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said quietly. "I know," I replied. "I didn't realize how much I'd absorbed from my family," he admitted. "How much of my self-worth was tied to comparison." I believed him. That didn't change anything. "I'm not angry," I told him. "I'm just done." He nodded slowly, like he'd been expecting that answer, even though he hoped for something else. "I never meant to make you feel small," he said. "I know," I replied, "but intent doesn't erase impact." That was the last real conversation we had. A few days later, I got an email from him. Long, detailed, apologetic. He didn't ask for another chance. He didn't ask to fix things. He just acknowledged the harm and said he hoped I'd find someone who appreciated me exactly as I am. I read it twice. Then I closed it. His cousin texted me later that night. "Thank you," she wrote, "for showing him what I went through, for showing me I wasn't crazy." I didn't feel victorious reading that. I felt tired. Tired of comparison. Tired of justifying my worth. Tired of watching someone I loved slowly realize they never respected me the way I deserved. And for the first time in months, that exhaustion felt honest, like the end of something that needed to end. Healing didn't arrive as a dramatic transformation. There was no sudden confidence, no inspirational montage, no moment where everything made sense all at once. It came quietly. In the mornings, when I woke up without the weight of anticipation in my chest. In the evenings, when I realized I no longer replayed conversations in my head, wondering how I could have phrased things differently to be more palatable, more impressive, more worthy. I started noticing how much energy I'd spent trying to be enough for someone who had already decided I wasn't. I didn't miss him the way I thought I would. I missed the idea of what we were supposed to become. The version of our future that existed before respect came with conditions. One morning, I opened my email and reread his apology. It was thoughtful, sincere, careful, and for the first time, I could see it clearly without the pull of hope attached to it. Apologies don't undo truths. Understanding doesn't rewrite history, and growth doesn't obligate forgiveness. I wished him well, genuinely. I hoped he would do the work. I hoped he would learn to untangle ambition from superiority, success from worth. But I also knew something with absolute certainty. That journey wasn't mine to walk with him. I stopped questioning whether I'd been manipulative, whether I'd gone too far, whether love should have required more patience from me. Because love that requires you to shrink, explain, or earn basic respect is not love. It's a negotiation disguised as devotion. I learned that respect isn't something you prove. It's something that's either there or it isn't. And when it isn't, no promotion, no paycheck, no version of your future self will ever be enough to create it. I'm moving forward now, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in clarity. I'm no longer interested in being someone's consolation prize, or their potential, or their project. I want partnership that doesn't keep score, love that doesn't compare, respect that isn't conditional. And this time I'll recognize the difference before it costs me years of my life. If there's one thing I know for sure now, it's this. I will never be with someone who makes me feel like I have to earn their respect. Because the right person won't need convincing. They'll see it from the start.